Hello, today we're going to be in Hebrews 5, 11 through 14. And as we enter into the text, we're going to see he's going to immediately allude back to the previous text. About this, we have much to say. Well, what is this? We always want to just scan back at that previous text. So if you're ever reading and you see something that alludes back to what was just said, just go back there and skim the previous paragraph, the previous chapter. And the previous paragraph is about how Jesus, when he was incarnate, when he took on flesh to dwell among his people, he offered up prayers and supplications, that he was obedient, and because of this, he is the one who saves all of those who obey him. And so this idea that Jesus is obedient, we are saved to be obedient to him. He has been then designated by God as a high priest after the order of Melchizedek. And about this, Jesus' priesthood, I think, is the big idea. So that Jesus is priest, and he's going to go into Psalm 110 later to describe how he's priest after the order of Melchizedek. Then what we're going to see is that we're expected to obey this priest. So about this, we have much to say, and it's hard to explain. So there's much to say. What is to be explained is hard to explain, since. So there's a reason why it's hard to explain, since you have become dull of hearing. So they've not been listening, they've not been paying attention, they're dull of hearing, and he's going to explain why they're dull of hearing. For, though by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you again the basic principles of the oracles of God. So these are people who should be mature in their faith, but instead of being mature, they still need people to teach them basic ideas. And again, this audience is a group of people that are tempted to go back to their old way of life in Judaism instead of pressing forward to faith in Jesus Christ as the culmination of everything that they've been taught and believed. So they're trying to go backwards to those elementary or basic principles. The same language is going to be used in chapter 6. So the basic oracles of God. So he's going to explain that you need milk. Who needs milk? Well, babies need milk. Babies don't eat steak, right? Babies eat milk, and then they graduate to like a pureed vegetable, and they move on from that. It's not until you're mature that you get solid food. This same language is going to be used by Paul in 2 Corinthians 2 and 3, where he's talking about how they aren't spiritual, meaning they're not mature. Ephesians 4, Paul's going to press them to maturity. So that's what we want to be pressed towards, is maturity. We shouldn't be stuck in the basic principles of the things of God. The gospel is good. The gospel is always good. It's for everyone. But we also want to move into those deeper things of God. And we do that by, studying who God is. For everyone who lives on milk, right? So again, milk, whoever lives on milk is unskilled in the word of righteousness, these oracles of God. The word of righteousness are really just the same thing. If you're just living on milk, you're unskilled in the basics of God's word, since they're a child, right? Because who eats milk? Children do. Children are the ones who eat milk. But solid food is for the mature. So again, the solid food is for the mature. For those who have their powers of discernment, here he's got a description of what maturity is. Someone who has the power of discernment, they've trained that power of discernment by constant practice. So if you're mature, you understand. What do you discern as well? You discern the difference between good and evil. So they have their powers of discernment trained by constant practice to distinguish good and evil. So the powers of discernment discern what is good and what is evil, what is right in God's eyes and what is evil in God's eyes. They train that. How do they train it? Constant practice. They're always evaluating. They're looking at what they see, what they read, what they watch, what they hear, and they're discerning, is this according to the oracles of God? Does this conform to God's word of righteousness? How are you going to be able to do that? Well, you're only going to be able to do that if you know God's word. And so the first part of training, I would say, is just reading the Bible regularly, often. and reading long swaths of text. And then you're going to then evaluate what you see, what you hear, what you take in through that biblical lens. Does this conform to this word of truth that God has given us? Does this conform to God's word of righteousness, to the oracles of God? And that is how we train and how we grow in our powers of discernment. And I pray that as pastors, we're training you to do that. And I pray that you are doing that as you are reading the word as well. May God bless us in this endeavor.